Thank you. Well, this is our final session in Tactics of Defending the Faith. It's going to be a short one because we're going to cover a very simple but powerful and practical tactic. I call it the steamroller tactic, and it is very, very valuable. My suspicion is that many of you will be able to use this tactic within the next 24 hours. Before we get into the new material, let's say something about what we covered last week. In the last session, we talked about a tactic called taking the roof off. And we talked about how that worked, how first we take another person's point of view seriously and pretend like it's true for the sake of discussion. And then we give it a test drive. We see what the logical consequences of that view happen to be. Where does it actually lead? I said that there were kind of three steps that were involved as you are trying to employ this tactic. The first is you think about what the person said and try to reduce their claim to its basic premise or its basic idea. Next, you do the test drive. You follow it out to its logical conclusion, and you see what the consequences are and see if anything odd results, anything counterintuitive. And finally, you invite the person to consider the implications of his or her view and the truth that follows from the analysis. You're trying to bring a correction. Basically, you're trying to get them to acknowledge what they already know to be true. And this is tied into the idea of why this tactic works so well. We talked about the idea that human beings are actually made in the image of God. They have to live in the world that God made. And if they live in God's world, but then pretend like God doesn't exist, there's always going to be some kind of point of tension. There's going to be some kind of emotional or intellectual dissonance. Things aren't going to fit. And you'll be able to see this in your conversations with people. They can't get to where they want to go based on their beliefs. And so what has happened is men, because of this tension, have erected a kind of roof over their head to protect themselves, to shield them from the logical implication of their beliefs. And what you want to do is remove that roof. You want to let the cold wind blow, let the avalanches fall, as Francis Schaeffer put it, and force them to look at the logical consequences of their view, hopefully have them admit to what they already know to be true. The final thing we did in the last section is we looked at a number of different examples of very specific things about how that would work out in conversations. Now, in this next session, we're going to learn a tactic called the steamroller. You're going to learn how to recognize a steamroller, what his signature characteristics are. I'm going to teach you the 3 steps to stop a steamroller and put you back in the driver's seat. It's really amazingly simple. I want you to note, though, something about the steamroller tactic. This is a defensive tactic. In other words, it's not, you don't want to be the steamroller. This is a tactic that will teach you how to deal with people who are steamrollers. But what is a steamroller, after all? Very simple. Steamrollers are people who overpower you. Now, they don't overpower you with their force of their arguments. They overpower you with the force of their personalities. They try to keep you off balance. They have strong opinions, they have big attitudes, and they have big mouths, all right? Their words come fast and furious. They keep you from collecting your wits. They keep you from giving a thoughtful answer. They keep you off balance and on the defensive while overwhelming you with attitude and a whole bunch of noise. Now, some of you are thinking of your favorite steamrollers here. No nudging, by the way. Steamrollers have one defining characteristic. They are constantly interrupting you. They are aggressive people who cut you off before you can respond to their questions. They ask you a question, you start to answer. Before you get 5 words out, they don't like what they've heard you say. They interrupt you and pound you with something else. You follow that rabbit trail for 5 or 6 words. They jump in, pound you with something else. And pretty soon you don't know where to go or what to do. You're being overwhelmed. If you try to respond to any new things, bang, they're right on top of you. He continues the questions, continues the interruptions. Sound familiar? By the way, he never listens to the response either. If this sounds familiar to you, you know you've been steamrollered. Now, there are some people that are kind of benevolent steamrollers. I mean, they're people who are just overexcitable and they just get going and they're not so much being mean or rude, they just don't know how to contain themselves. And sometimes you've been, as Christians, talking about your beliefs, I'm sure benevolent steamrollers in certain circumstances. But usually, steamrollers are not benevolent, they're malevolent. They are insincere people. They know it's easier to ask the hard questions than to listen to the hard answers. And they're not interested in the answers. They are interested in winning. And they're interested in winning through intimidation. And this is why, though it's not always the case, most steamrollers are men, especially men who are in positions of power and capability. Now, because a steamroller is aggressive, I'm going to warn you in advance, you have to be a little aggressive to manage them. But you can do it. Some of you, I realize, it's going to take a little courage, a little intestinal fortitude, but I'm going to give you 3 steps that you can follow that will help you to manage and cage the most aggressive steamroller. I've done this dozens of times with people, on the radio, in public settings, in private conversations, and it's worked virtually every single time. First, I'd like you to do a student interactive. You'll find it on page 100 of your manuals. And in groups of 3 or 4, I want you to talk a little bit and share your own experiences with steamrollers. Has this ever happened to you? What was it like? How did it feel? What did you say in response? Go ahead and take about 3 minutes and mix it up a little bit and talk about those experiences. Now, there are 3 steps in dealing with a steamroller. Here's the first one. You've got to stop the interruption graciously but firmly, and then briefly negotiate a kind of agreement about how you're going to continue. You stop the intrusion. It can be done very quickly and very simply. Somebody's interrupting you, and you could do a little body language and just hold your hand up. Don't put it right in his face, but just hold it up for a moment and just say, hold on just a second, I'm almost finished. Is it okay if I finish my thought? And then I'll let you jump in. It's very, very simple. The more excitable people that are not malevolent in this, they'll stop. Oh yeah, sorry, I'm just getting a little bit excited, kind of thing. You just say, hold on just a second, I'm not quite finished. What you don't want to do is you don't want to say, excuse me, I'm talking. Can I please finish my conversation? This isn't going to help, especially with this kind of person. You might ask, you're interested in what I have to say, right? Okay, hold on. Don't be afraid to ask for adequate time. This is meant to be a conversation, okay? You could say, hey, hold on just a minute, let me finish. You ask a good question. You want an answer, right? Okay, let me give it to you, and then I'll let you back in. So when I do it, I'm always negotiating very informally, and I'm letting them know that they'll have a chance. This is especially true for me and important for me on the radio. People think I'm the man with the microphone, I got the power, I'm not going to give them a shot. No, I will. I just want to play by some rules. Conversation, polite stuff, back and forth, okay? So don't be afraid to ask for that from the other person. If this person is especially aggressive, you might want to be calm and wait for a clear opening. Blah, 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 blah. Just wait them out. Don't interrupt them. And then when they're finished, then say, hold on, could we do it this way? Can I finish my comment before you come back at you, and then before you come back at me, and then we'll go forward with this. Now, when you get this pause, negotiate that agreement, get a response from this person. You want them to nod their head and say, oh, okay, yeah, that's all right. Something like that, because this isn't rhetorical. You're actually asking in a very brief and gentle way for some respect and courtesy, basically. Do it with a smile on your face. Don't let any annoyance or hostility creep into your voice. It would be the wrong thing to do with this kind of person, all right? Here's how this might look. Is it okay with you if I take a few moments to answer your first question before you ask another one? I'll give you a chance to respond, but I just want to answer the first one. Is that all right? Okay, great. You might say, I know it's easier to ask the questions than it is to listen to the answers, but I need a moment to explain myself. Is that okay with you? Notice how I'm always asking for permission, okay? You might say, they ask a bunch of questions in a row. Boom, boom. I say, wait. Well, let me respond to the first challenge, okay? And when I'm done, then you can jump back in. Would that be all right? Okay, so very simple like that. Now I'm going to tell you, that response right there, your first step, stop them and negotiate, that's going to solve 90% of your steamrollers, okay? You might say, that's a good question, deserves a good response, let me give it a shot. People are going to settle down for the most part. Now, when they do that, keep your end of the bargain. Be sure to respond adequately to the first question before he's allowed to ask another. But if you told him that you're going to let him back in, then let him back in. Be brief, be to the point, then let him come back in. Make sure, by the way, that when he's asked a question and you've given a response, you know he's jumping on to the next question. Sometimes I've had to say to people, now, wait a minute, I can see it in your eyes. You're already in the next thing. Stay with me here for a moment, okay? Do you understand the answer I just gave you? Are you satisfied with it? A lot of people, especially these kind, they'll ask the question, right? And then they're not listening to the answer. They don't care about the answer. I want them to care about the answer. I'm going to say, wait a minute. Now, is that a good answer? If not, what's wrong with it? So I'm focusing, I'm controlling the conversation. Make your point, let them back in, continue the dialogue. Don't become a steamroller yourself and talk on and on and on, or interrupt and interrupt and interrupt when they're trying to come back at you, okay? Now, I want you to go back to your workbook, and I want you to go to page 101, and there's an interactive exercise where you can just kind of role play and step through the process of this very first step. I want you to get in pairs, and the first person should ask a simple question. I don't know, what's your political party, or some kind of question that maybe entails some controversial thing, and you start responding, and that person's going to interrupt very quickly, within a sentence or two, and start having at you. And that's where I just want you to practice that. Put your hand up, say, hold on just a second. Is it okay if I answer that question first, and I'll let you back in? Just practice that thing a little bit and get used to it. And when you're done with that with one person, I want you to switch roles, and the other person can have a shot too. Why don't you take 4 minutes to do that? Okay, so the first step of the steamroller tactic is you stop them and negotiate. Second step, first you stop them, second you shame them. If the steamroller breaks trust with your first agreement, or maybe you can't, in some cases, you can't succeed in stopping him at all to even do the first thing, you're going to have to be more aggressive. You shame him by taking the very same tack that you just took, but you do it more directly and more explicitly. In particular, you ask very specifically for courtesy in his conversation with you. And here's how that might look. By the way, when they run on the rabbit trail, ignore those rabbit trails. Don't chase them. Just ignore them. If you're not able to get in right away, let them talk, and then when they stop, speak directly to the steamroller problem and say something like this. You would like an answer from me, wouldn't you? I mean, I figured you asked the question because you wanted an answer, but then you kept interrupting me, and you went on and on and on, and I'm not sure whether you want an answer or not. So would you like an answer, or do you want to just continue talking? Which is it? Now again, you're looking for a response there. You might say, could I ask you a favor? I'd love to respond to your concern, but you keep interrupting me. Could I have a few moments to develop my point without being cut off? I'll be sure to let you come back in a minute. What do you think? Is that okay with you? Now, do you see how this is more direct than the earlier way of looking at it? You might say, can I ask you a quick question? I need to know if you want an answer to your challenge or you just want to talk. Maybe you just want to talk, and if you do, I'm a good listener. I'll talk, I'll listen. So just go ahead and talk, and then let me know when you're finished. Then we'll be all done. But I need to know. I mean, if you want an audience, I'll be there. Now, you see that's edgier, right? If you did that the first time, that would be kind of rude. But this guy's aggressive. And so you need to be more specific to address that particular thing. That's why we call the second step, shame them. Let me give you the most aggressive way of putting this. And I've used this before. You look them right in the eye and you say something like this. Here's what I have in mind. You ask your questions and make your point, and I will listen. When you're done, I'll respond, and you won't interrupt me. When I'm done, it'll be your turn to be polite, and I'll let you have your say. Now, I need to know if that's okay with you. If not, this conversation is over. What's it going to be? That'll do the job, ladies and gentlemen. Notice I'm not being mean. I'm not being harsh. I'm demanding courtesy in a relationship. And I'm asking very explicitly of a very aggressive, obnoxious, rude person what they want to do. Do they want to have a courteous conversation? Or do they want, or do they want me to just leave? Because I'm not going to put up with this. Every once in a while on the radio, I've had to pull the pot down, so the other guy can't get through. And it's only happened 3 or 4 times in 15 years, but sometimes you've got to be real direct with people. This last example, very aggressive. But these are aggressive people, and that's what's required. Steamrollers are strong. Sometimes they have to be answered in kind. Now, if you get a cooperative response, and a lot of times they'll say, at this point, some of them will just say, oh, I'm really sorry. I'm just really, really sorry. Accept their apology, and then go back to the first question. Don't reinforce the rabbit trails by trying to cover everything. Just start at the beginning again and resume your conversation. You might say, now your concern, as I understand it, is this. Then repeat what you thought you heard them say. Make sure you get it right, and then go on. I mean, don't be snippy or smug. Stay focused. Stay pleasant. Stay gracious. Now, we've prepared a small clip of what this might look like in actual conversation. Take a look at this clip, and you'll see what it's like.
Man, I don't know if I can handle another meeting like that. Can you believe we just had a meeting to schedule a meeting?
Yeah, I know, it's kind of crazy, but hopefully things will get better. Hey, listen, I wanted to ask you, did you get that article I sent you on intelligent design?
Yeah, you know what? I was reading it last night. It was totally interesting.
Oh, good.
But, Alan, I was surprised. I thought you were a reasonable guy. But it seems like that whole article is against evolution. I mean, how can you in a modern world be against evolution when there's so many good evidences? Like, for example, the finches on the Galapagos Islands, Darwin's finches. How do you explain that?
Yeah, that's a good question, Steve. I think what's important to recognize with Darwin's finches is that, yes, you have the finch beak size getting larger. But what's important to recognize is that the finch continues to remain a finch.
What about the peppered moths in England? I mean, you've got light-colored moths, then dark-colored moths. I mean, it seems like one's becoming the other.
Well, yeah, the peppered moth is a different example. But just kind of getting back to the finch beak example, what you have here is a finch continuing to remain a finch. It's not like it changes into a different
Alan,
species.
do you receive National Geographic?
Well, no. I mean,
every month they have a new evidence for evolution in there. I mean, scientists
Steve,
all over the world are finding new reasons to believe in evolution.
Steve, hold on a second. Look, you asked a good question about the finch beaks. Let me go ahead and answer that, and then I'll let you jump back in. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, you're right, Alan. I'm sorry. I just get really frustrated when I talk to people who are so anti-science. It just seems like you're putting God in the gaps.
Okay, that's all right. That's right. So getting back to the finch beak example, what you have here is simply what's called an example of microevolution. In a microevolution, we as Christians don't even think this is controversial. It's simply just...
But what about the hominids? What about Neanderthal and Lucy and those other human-like ancestors of ours? I mean, it seems clear in the fossil chain, they go from one to the next, and then you have humans. It seems like a clear example.
Well, Steve, I'm
what about Haeckel's embryos, anyway? You got embryos that all look the same at one stage of development, different species?
All right, Steve, hold on a second. I'm trying to answer your question, but you just keep interrupting me. All right, so
in the vertebrates, like humans have a certain kind of arm, birds have the same kind of arm. How is that possible?
Steve, I thought we had an agreement. All right. I mean, do you want to have a conversation with yourself, or are you going to let me engage these issues? All right. Why don't we do this? Ask me a question. I'll go ahead and answer it. Once I'm done, I'll let you jump back in. You can bring up another challenge. Does that sound fair?
Yeah, Alan, you're right. I'm sorry. It just seems like you have your head in the sand.
Well, okay.
I mean, I don't know. Let's see. Where were we? I mean, I guess we were talking about pepper moss and hominids. Let's see. Where were?
It was the finch beak example.
Oh, you didn't even get to finish that?
No, I didn't finish it.
All right. Go ahead.
That's okay. That's right. So what I was saying was, people use this example of microevolution as evidence for macroevolution, which is a completely different thing. And as I was saying, even as Christians, we don't think microevolution is...
Time for another interactive. Go to page 103, and you could read there what I want you to do. Basically, I want you to pair up with a new partner, and I want you to practice step number 2, just as you did with step number 1 in the last exercise. But this time, I want the steamroller to be much more aggressive, only giving way when the second person employs step number 2 to stop him. Okay? Take about 2 minutes, and then switch roles, and then we'll come back and talk a little bit more. Go ahead. Wow, that was interesting, wasn't it? That's hard. But you'll be amazed if you gain this skill, what you'll be able to do with it and how you'll be able to manage tough situations in the future. By the way, this second step is very effective in taming even the most belligerent steamroller. However, it doesn't always work. And that's when you have to go to step 3. Step 1, stop them and negotiate. Step 2, shame them and negotiate. Step 3, leave them. When all else fails, let it go. Walk away. If he won't let you answer, listen politely until he's done, then drop it. Let him have the satisfaction of having the last word. Then leave. Wisdom dictates not wasting time with this kind of fool. Now, I know what you're thinking. Hey, isn't that kind of non-Christian? I don't think so. Remember what Jesus said in Matthew chapter 7. Do not give what is holy to dogs, and do not throw your pearls before swine. Okay, how do we know when we cross that line? You read the next verse. The next phrase tells us, lest they trample them under your feet and tear you to pieces. If you're talking to somebody, if you're offering those pearls, as it were, to that person, and they are tearing you up, and they're trampling it underfoot, and they're just about to turn on you and tear you to pieces, boy, that's the time to exit stage right. Just leave. Be generous with the truth, unless you encounter someone who shows utter contempt for the precious gift that you're offering them. If he's the kind of person who will take what is holy and trample on it and turn on you, don't waste your time. There's plenty of ripe fruit out there. People that are ready to listen, spend your time with them. And I think that's a proper application of what Jesus was saying. So what main points did we cover in this session? First, we learned how to recognize that awful person, the steamroller. Steamrollers overpower you with their strong personalities, and they interrupt constantly. Plus, they never listen. They don't care what your answers are. They want to overpower you and win the argument. They don't want to learn. Second, we learned 3 steps to deal with the steamroller. Steps that will help put you back into control of the conversation. We learned, first of all, that you stop them and negotiate an agreement. Secondly, if that doesn't work, we learn to shame him by asking very directly for courtesy. And finally, if that doesn't work, you stop him, you shame him, then you leave him. Go on to somebody else. That's the way to deal with a steamroller. Well, that kind of rounds out our time together. Our instruction is finished, and I want to offer just a couple of reflections that will help you. Because in a way, it's fair to say that you are now trained. You have been put through your paces. You have been given the information. There is a whole world out there that's waiting for you. The harvest is plentiful, Jesus said, but the workers are few. You're the workers. And now you have a lot more tools in your toolbox that will help you to make a difference for the cause of Christ. I have a friend who is a former Marine officer, and he said that in the Marines they had a training adage. And the adage was simply this: the more you sweat in training, the less you bleed in battle. I like that. The more you sweat in training, the less you bleed in battle. Anybody in here like tests? Most people don't like tests, right? Has there ever been a time when though you didn't like tests, you weren't afraid of taking a test? You didn't mind at all? Yeah, those few times when you were what? Prepared. When you knew the answers. No sweat, no problem there. The same thing here. You do your training. You do your homework. You follow through on these exercises. You begin to put them into play, and you'll do a lot less bleeding on the field. You don't have to be afraid of those circumstances, those tests that you'll face out there, because you will know the answers. And here's how you can prepare for those things. First, know your Bibles well enough to know the knowledge, to give an accurate answer for the hope that's within you. That's what Peter says in 1 Peter chapter 3 and verse 15. Paul says to Timothy in 2 Timothy chapter 2 that we're to study to show ourselves approved, a workman who does not need to be ashamed, handling accurately the word of truth. So you have to have that knowledge component. Secondly, study these tactics. Become familiar with how they work. Know when to use them and how to initiate them. Finally, I want to encourage you to do what I think some of you have been doing already. Push yourself beyond your comfort zone. Be courageous here. Begin to mix it up with other people. Start conversations that you might not have started before. You'll learn that the best way to learn something is to get out there immediately before you're adequately trained or before you think you're ready and start using this material. Yeah, you're going to take a few hits, but you're going to give a few yourself in a good way, and you're also going to find out what the other side has, which I think you'll be surprised to discover is often not very much. And fourth, don't be discouraged by outward appearances, by the way people respond. You know, sometimes we prejudge a situation, and we think, oh, that person will never listen, or that was a failed enterprise. You do not know the kind of impact that you just had in that person's life. And maybe it's not that person that you impacted. Maybe what you said bounced off of that hard heart and ricocheted off and hit a soft heart, somebody else who is eavesdropping in the conversation. Lee Strobel calls that ricochet evangelism. Don't get caught in the trap of trying to assess your effectiveness in every conversation. The Holy Spirit can do all kinds of things that you're not really aware of at the moment. Remember, the harvest is always a season away, all right? Some of these things take time. Finally, I'd like to encourage you to live out the 10 virtues of a good ambassador. We've listed these on our website at str.org. That's Stand to Reason's website. Let me just read them to you, and you'll see how they really capture a lot of things that I've been talking about in these last 6 sessions. The Ambassador's Creed. An ambassador is ready. He's alert for chances to represent Christ and will not back away from a challenge or an opportunity. An ambassador is patient. He won't quarrel, but he'll listen in order to understand, and then with gentleness seek to respectfully correct those in opposition. An ambassador is reasonable. He has informed convictions, not just feelings. He gives reasons. He asks questions. He aggressively seeks answers and will not be stumped by the same challenge twice. An ambassador is also tactical. He adapts to each unique person and situation, maneuvering with wisdom to challenge bad thinking, presenting the truth in an understandable and compelling way. An ambassador is clear, careful with language, and will not rely on Christian lingo, nor gain unfair advantage with empty slogans. An ambassador is fair. He's sympathetic and understanding towards the opposition and will acknowledge the merits of opposing and contrary views. An ambassador is honest. He's careful with the facts and will not misrepresent his opponent. He will not overstate his own case or understate the demands of the gospel. An ambassador is humble. In other words, he's provisional in his claims, knowing that his understanding of truth is fallible and will not press a point beyond what his evidence allows. An ambassador is also attractive. He will act with grace, kindness, and good manners and will not dishonor Christ in his conduct. And finally, an ambassador is dependent. In other words, he knows that effectiveness requires joining his best efforts with God's power. In short, a good ambassador represents Christ in a winsome and attractive way. And you are God's ambassadors. You are the key to making a difference for the kingdom. If you apply the right tactics with God's help, you can help a lost person, a confused person, see not only his problem, his own rebellion against God, but also the solution that is in the Savior, Jesus Christ. With God's help, you can show the world that Christianity is worth thinking about. Now go out and you give them heaven, okay? Thank you very much.